His books include The Joy of Christ's Coming, Transmission, a Meditation for the New Age, A Master Speaks, and Maitreya's Mission. On page 22 of The Reappearance of Maitreya the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom, Krim quotes message number 10, a telepathic communication from Maitreya, which states in part,
I come to tell you that you will see me very soon, each in his own way. Those who look for me in terms of my beloved disciple, the Master Jesus, will find his qualities in me.
And on page 13 of the same publication, Krim states in response to a question raised at one of his lectures,
It may be very difficult for Christians to believe, but the Christ is evolving too, just as everything in cosmos evolves. He came before as the avatar of light and love. He returns now as the avatar of light, love, wisdom, and will. Because in the last 2,000 years, he has come into a total at-one-ment with the will of God, which he had not done before. This was the Gethsemane experience. He realized that he could not accomplish his task by his will alone, but only with God's will. That's really what the Gethsemane experience is about. In these last 2,000 years, he has come into a knowledge of the will of God. He comes now to release that energy of will, and an entirely new aspect of divinity will be presented to mankind. This is the new revelation.
Evolution is the process by which we recognize in ourselves and demonstrate in our lives that divinity. Now the Masters, and Maitreya the Christ as the master of all the masters, the most evolved of all the masters, have done this and done it to a point where they are literally God. They are not God in the absolute sense, except that we are all that, but they know God in a closer, more intimate way because they have gone through the process of evolution, gradually expanding their awareness until they become more and more aware of more and more of the mind of God. And that's the only difference between them and us. That's what they shall teach us to do. And the evolutionary process is the process whereby we expand in awareness to become like God.
It's called Christ consciousness to appeal to Christians. It could be called God consciousness, could be called Krishna consciousness. That's their evangelistic arm to Christians, calling it Christ consciousness. But it is no more or less than the old demonic hiss that has reverberated down through the quarters of time, ye shall be as gods.
Since the New Age believes that we will all become as gods, how do they view the second coming of Jesus Christ? There are two distinct viewpoints. One claims that Christ consciousness will slowly come upon all of humanity, indwelling the world with a new enlightened harmony.
We can no longer manifest this Christ consciousness through one being because we have the tendency to follow one being, and it takes the attention off of ourselves. So what's now coming through is that instead of having one being like Christ or Buddha, that each of us in our own way are birthing that Christ energy within us. So we are becoming the second coming. We are the second coming.
The biblical interpretation of the second coming is that Christ will come again as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and every eye will see him. New Agers think that humanity must prepare for the second coming of Christ by raising the spiritual Christ consciousness of the planet. But the biblical view is that man has nothing to do with the timing of the second coming. When Jesus comes again as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, it will be at the time of his choosing, and man can neither prevent it nor invoke it.
And then there's the more messianic wing of the New Age movement that looks to someone like, say, Lord Maitreya and Benjamin Krim as kind of the John the Baptist to prepare the way for a specific person who will be this New Age Messiah.
Maitreya has been in the Himalayas for thousands of years, and while remaining there, his consciousness entered into that of Jesus at the baptism. And from the baptism to the crucifixion, Jesus became the Christ. The Christ principle, the consciousness of Maitreya, worked from that moment through Jesus for 3 years. Those around him, those who should have recognized him, didn't recognize him because they were looking for somebody else. The priests, the fundamentalists of that time, the people who should have known better, projected an idea of a man, a warrior king, who would come out of the house of David and who would free them from the Roman yoke. He did nothing of the kind. This time, Maitreya has come himself. And this is for the first time in human history that the teacher has come himself. The Buddha came by overshadowing the disciple, his disciple, the Prince Gautama. And the Prince Gautama suddenly, at the age of 29, became Gautama Buddha. He gave up his princedom, his wealth, his family, and wandered off into the jungle to become Gautama Buddha. That's the age-old way for the presentation to the world of the teacher. This time, Maitreya has come himself at the head of his group. The masters of the wisdom are coming into the world with him. One of them is the Master Jesus, and the Master Jesus has been living in Rome for the last 3 years, on the outskirts of Rome. Jesus, the Master Jesus, is in charge of the Christian churches, but the Christ, the Lord Maitreya, is the world teacher for all groups, religious and non-religious alike. Maitreya, since the end of May 1982, has been ready to come forward to declare himself openly as the Christ, as the world teacher for all groups. He has awaited only an invitation from humanity through the media networks of the world.
New Agers often justify their various viewpoints by reinterpreting the scriptures to fit their own concepts of reality, claiming that Christians simply do not understand what the Bible is truly saying.
A lot of people, most people calling themselves Christians for the last 1,500 years, have failed to understand what the Bible is saying, primarily because they haven't read it in the original tongue.
Well, they're looking for a God-like figure who will also be a great, powerful judge, judging the sheep from the goats, separating the believers from the non-believers, coming down on a cloud on Judgment Day to be such a judge. It isn't like that at all. A complete misreading of the scriptures. My master has said about the attitude of certain fundamentalist groups, especially Christian groups, that they are expecting the representative of God as the Antichrist. They see him as the personification of evil, Satan's henchman. And he says this is exactly a repetition of what happened in Palestine 2,000 years ago. He said many of them are the self-same people who were the enemies of Jesus and heard Jesus' simple teaching of love. He says they recognize once again the intonation of love, but they choose to see it as false. He says that very love, which they will come to recognize in Maitreya, will cleanse this fear from their breasts, and they will come to recognize Maitreya as the very Christ they rejected in Jesus 2,000 years ago.
What New Agers have done with Jesus is they've taken the New Testament sculpture of Jesus, and they've crafted an esoteric and mystical chisel, and they've hammered away at the New Testament sculpture of Jesus until an entirely new image has emerged.
But who do you say that I